much for being here and for participating in this panel. I think it's a very important issue and important topic to address. And after the signature of this memorandum of understanding, I think this is actually something that makes much sense to debate and discuss. There is, of course, a fight for the rights of media broadcasting and the sports events. There has been a lot of recent reports and studies on this topic. I recall the European Audiovisual Observatory published the mapping report on national remedies against online piracy of sports content at the request of the European Commission. The European Parliament also issued a recommendation, a resolution to address this topic, and these are important documents that set out some of the issues and the measures that might be solutions and ways to move forward with the problems of illegal consumption of these sports events, both on the legal side, on the technology side, and also, of course, on the economic side, the way things are being addressed. And so I'd like to start with Grégoire here and ask you about how do you think, in terms of the collaborative work that might be undertaken between all of the agents in this area that can be done to safeguard the piracy issues in terms of media rights and IP rights.
Well, thank you very much, first of all, and again, a big thank you to the entire SIGA team, of course, Emmanuel, for the brilliant job of putting this conference together. I can only wholeheartedly agree with his view that we need integrity in this world, and the piracy conversation, or the anti-piracy conversation, is very much a part of that. With regard to your question, let me first of all maybe clarify a little bit who I am, who I represent here today. So I run the Trade Association for Commercial Television and VOD in Europe. What does that mean? We're essentially based in Europe, and we are the voice of that sector with regard to the European institutions. So our job is mainly to make sure that our members, who you will know well, because they're quite famous broadcasters and very involved in sports for some of them, such as Sky, but also Be in France. We also have, of course, naturally Canal Plus and many others who are very invested in sports, can continue to invest. And we are very glad that we've had the support of many stakeholders from our sector, but also from sports, with Schrock and others along the years, to ensure that this issue of live piracy is actually tackled correctly. Now, this has been a very long-running conversation in policy circles. We have heard time and again through the years that essentially politicians wanted to do something, were keen on ensuring that the multi-billion losses that are made by our members and other sectors, such as, again, sports, but also increasingly in the live performance. Think about, we just went through COVID. A lot of the experiences of live performances are going online. So all of these businesses are looking to the online experience as of course, naturally, a new way of reaching audience, not so new anymore, but a way of reaching audience. But they're also trying to make sure of how do we make sure that we can continue to invest and reinvest without experiencing serious leakage at economic level. And this is not a problem that's only for broadcasters, only for VOD as they enter increasingly in the live space, but also for sports, also for live performances, but anybody who interacts with the sports environment. Because at the end of the day, if the sector is not sustainable, then the incentives to invest are not there, and the overall quality goes down. So for us, it's been a long journey, and I think we've just launched, this comes on the back of a big event in the European Parliament last week, but we've just launched a big call to action, and I will come and bother a lot of people in the room today, perhaps, to talk about this call to action with regard to asking for the European Commission to do something about piracy. And we have a work program that is coming up. Today is the State of the Union, for some of you that might know. So we're competing with President von der Leyen at the moment for attention. But yes, it's a big job, and we're all trying with different sectors to have a joint-up approach in order to tackle this issue. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. We'll get there again, probably to discuss a little bit more on the collaboration side. But I'd like to now take the opportunity to congratulate once more Greg for the signature of the memorandum of understanding with SIGA, and also ask you a little bit how do you envision building upon this and applying these integrity values to also further this fight against piracy?
I mean, I'd start by saying, first of all, EBU, Eurovision Sport, is quite a significant rights holder. So it's in our interest to protect those rights. We have, European rights for a lot of kind of major sports events, such as the Tour de France, Vuelta a España, all of the classics, the World Cup, FIFA World Cup in Qatar. We have for 35 territories. Things like World Athletics, European Athletics, World Swimming, European Swimming, Gymnastics, winter sports, etc. So we're quite a significant rights holder as well. So it's absolutely in our interest and in the interest of our members that the integrity of those rights is protected. We represent free to air, so we're not in the pay space. We are in the quite largely in the advertising funded space. So there's quite a lot of crossover. So piracy is of interest to us. It is important that we align and we work. We have a very, very active base in Brussels, lobbying in Brussels, and we work very, very closely with other organizations in Brussels on that. And, I suppose from our perspective, it would be important that we lend a voice to this and support our colleagues in the federations, the rights holders, and our commercial colleagues, as well as our own members, because it is in our own interest if these rights are damaged. I would say one thing though, and I think it's important to kind of, it's something that comes across quite a lot from our members, is that we need to be careful as rights holders, in terms of the federations I'm talking about now, Mark, that we don't undermine the value of the rights ourselves, that we actually, we're getting a lot of pressure from federations, and it's very, very understandable given the digital world we're living in, to disseminate a lot of these rights on third-party platforms such as YouTube, etc., Facebook, whatever, Instagram, whatever it happens to be. Our members would contend that that's understandable and we get it. However, it's not paid for. It's kind of, we're giving away value for free, and that it's really, really important that we align on that with our partners in sports federations, that we actually protect the value of sports rights, because our members certainly and the commercial sector are major funders of sport, and the health of sport is really important to us. It's important to reach out to new audiences, and we can find ways of doing that, we believe, without kind of undermining the value of those rights. So it's just something to watch out for. It's a developing trend. It didn't start today or yesterday. It's been happening for quite a while. But it is important that rights holders understand that we need to work together to protect the value of these rights. Piracy is one thing, but also we can often even undermine the value a little bit ourselves by maybe kind of offering these things for free to platforms that are not willing to pay. Because ultimately, if you undermine the value, then the payers, the current payers, may look at different ways of doing things in the future.
Very, very true. That's also an important aspect, of course, the way that economically these rights are exploited and how they are set. And so I would turn to Mark Lichtenheim, the chairman of Sports Rights Owners Coalition, to ask him, in terms of that commercial activity, what needs to be done to take advantage of the opportunities in the current landscape, and also taking into account the existing risks on these, the exploitation of these rights.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, SIGA, for the opportunity to talk to you this morning. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Sports Rights Owners Coalition, we represent over 50 of not just Europe, but the world's major sports rights owners. And our mission for the last 15 years has really been to protect the underlying intellectual property rights that finance sport. And that covers a wide range of things, but at the moment, digital piracy and the IPR infringements associated are without doubt the most important and indeed existential threat that we face as sport. We've only got 50 minutes, so I could probably talk about this all morning, but I just want to give you a little quick chronology of where we are in this fight, because it is a fight. And we've been deeply involved with it, with governments around the world, and particularly with the European Union and the European Commission. As Greg alluded to, the live aspect of content and its piracy is particularly critical. Film obviously has a longer tail, music in terms of its value. But a live event, whether it's a sporting event or a concert or whatever, it has a finite value within that time frame. So for any remedy to be effective in dealing with live piracy, it has to happen within the time frame of the event. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but our existing legal tools are not equipped for reacting this quickly. I mean, we can't go to a court and get a judgment and deal with it during the course of a live event. So we need tools, we need remedies, we need effective measures that allow us to take down that content in a timely manner. Currently, there is a beautiful word called expeditious that says expeditious removal should happen once intermediaries are notified of takedowns, but there's no definition of how many minutes there are in an expeditious. So we really need some clarity of that in terms of a time frame. But as the coalition, it won't surprise you that we've been lobbying very hard to get an effective remedy. Now, one of the specificities of sport is that it is not subject to copyright in itself. A sporting event, because it hasn't happened, because there's no script, or at least we hope there isn't a script, it doesn't attract copyright, it's not subject to copyright. So it's only once it has been fixated in a broadcast that it becomes copyrightable, and even that is not the same in all jurisdictions, even within Europe. So hence we have to work with our broadcasters very closely in terms of taking down that content. Now, we tried in the copyright directive of the EU, the new one, over the last several years, to get a neighbouring right for sport so that we could intervene in the piracy of our content, even though we didn't have a copyright per se. That was rejected and resulted in the resolution of the European Parliament that actually something did have to be done for sport and live content in this context. And they called upon the European Commission to act and produce legislative proposals to address this very specific issue. That was last year. For those of you who are not followers of what happens in Brussels, we've had the Digital Services Act, which has just recently been concluded. The Digital Services Act, though, is a very horizontal piece of legislation which doesn't address specific sectors. And we were told that we should just be patient and wait, and then once the DSA was put to bed, that would be the time to address any sector-specific issues such as this. Well, we waited very patiently, and the DSA has been put to bed, and yet we still haven't had any proposals. And time is running out in this current commission because there's only another year or so to run. So we have a round table tomorrow, just plugging that, with a representative of the European Commission from DG Connect, so maybe we'll have an opportunity to put some more pressure on the Commission. But it really has become quite frustrating because we're not asking for anything new. We're really asking just for mechanisms to be able to enforce the rights that we have. And let's be blunt about what piracy is. I mean, it is theft. Pirates are stealing our content and redistributing it. We have legal certainty that it is our content because content today is digitally watermarked, it's fingerprinted. There's no ambiguity as to where it's come from. And the Commission has, for years, told us that what is illegal offline is also illegal online. But we're waiting for some legislation to prove that that is actually the case, because at the moment, what is illegal online seems to be okay. I mean, to give you some perspective, a report last year, independent report by Ampere Analysis, estimated the cost of piracy, sports piracy worldwide, to be $28 billion. Now, that is half the size of the legal market for sports rights, for sports media rights. Half the size. In the tangible world, in the offline world, it is estimated that 5% of goods in world trade are counterfeit. 5%. So, we have 10 times the size of the problem, and yet in the tangible world we have Interpol, Europol, all kinds of people trying to root out the cause of the counterfeiters, but I'm afraid we don't seem to have the same level of involvement and application for the pirates in the digital world. So, in a nutshell, we are, certainly from a European perspective, waiting for the European Commission to come up with a legislative proposal to deal with this. And as I say, it's really just to enforce the rights that we have, not to ask for anything new.
Thank you very much. That's a great summary of the challenges, the legal challenges that these enforcement measures and also on the right side you are facing. I'd like to turn again to Grégoire to ask a question here on also the way that these sporting events are consumed, the way that people actually look for content and how they do this. That has changed, of course, with a multiplicity of ways that people can watch them. The offer has also significantly increased, naturally, not only in terms of format, but also in terms of the number of players in the market, and that, of course, brings some new challenges. How do you see that, and how that impacts this fight for rights?
Thank you. I certainly hope I'm not going to have to give a masterclass on how to pirate content. But look, what we're seeing on the market are very different types of illegal services propping up, right? From it used to be years ago, you could pirate the signal in some kind of way, or you could try and get around with when you had the old pay TV cards and try to traffic them. But now we have extremely evolved players on the market, some acting with those famous Cody boxes that you can basically buy quite easily anywhere, to be honest, which are already preloaded with access to X many channels. We've seen services that are so sophisticated that they have their own customer service. You can actually call them and they will, they look like a genuine business and they will say, what can we do for you? And naturally, they're going to be a lot cheaper in some offers, because when you don't pay rights, obviously, you have a serious chunk of...
Much easier.
Exactly, that you don't have to do. So, I'm not going to go into the various services, but there are apps, etc. It's become extremely complicated to follow, and extremely expensive as well, right? If you look, if you just look, for example, the story, for example, of video sharing platforms, not to name Google, but has been that essentially at the beginning, right, we were looking at a very large amount of illegal content being uploaded on that. The solution that was found was that there would be something like Content ID that you would sign up to so as to make sure your content would go down. It just turns out, though, that you as the company have to pay for it and you have to manage it. So it's kind of a weird situation, right, where you're told, well, we have a tool for you, but you're going to have to pay for it and just do all the work, which is kind of weird because they continue making money off of that. But so I'm just having a go at Google every now and then. It feels good. But I think the main point of this initiative here is not actually focused on those kind of large players. What is the real focus are all these nimble and small players who are very good at developing seriously high-level services and are very good at changing and being very dynamic in their view of escaping authority. And we're also seeing, and I think we shouldn't forget that at the end of the day, a lot of these players are not nerds in the garage, right? These are not the free guys or just enjoying themselves, etc. These are part very large criminal networks. And so, I mean, what we're trying to impress on people is that, when you do go and pay for these services, you are laundering money from cocaine. You are laundering money from trafficking. You are helping people to set up software on your computer that will mine Bitcoin towards ends that are not necessarily what you would like to support. So, in a nutshell, there's a lot there going on. And it's extremely dynamic, very sophisticated, and colleagues at Europol can tell you a lot more than I can about that. Now, what's interesting at the political level is that we've had for years people in front of us, fundamentalists, I'd say, of rights to expression, because somehow they equate piracy as a right of free expression, telling us that, well, this is happening because there is not enough legal offer on the market. Well, I don't know if you've looked around right now at how many offers you have in terms of TV, VOD, PSB, commercial. I think you're inundated, right? You'd probably say there was too much.
Too much offer.
Exactly.
That's now an issue as well.
Exactly. So, but the level of piracy hasn't gone down. It has steadily continued to climb through the years. So that argument's no longer valid. So these very same people who were telling you that 5 years ago are now telling you, well, actually, it's because there's too much offer. So, you never win that game, just like you'll never win against free. But I think our members are extremely good and are talking more and more with different parts of the ecosystem in order to tackle this issue. What is certain is that we can't do it without legislation that supports us. European Union can't go on talking about sovereignty, about supporting sectors, supporting creative and cultural and sports sector, if it doesn't enact the basic tools to allow value to stay in the ecosystem. Just like it cannot say we are high investors in culture, which they are, by the way, because there is a big media program in Europe, and at the same time not enact the tools to protect their investments. That's the first thing you do. If you invest in something, you're going to protect it. You buy a house, you buy insurance to go with it. Well, we just want insurance for our content or the content that we pay for at a very high price to be sure that we can monetize that, reinvest it, and invest in many other downstream activities that are related to it.
Thank you very much. That certainly is an issue that the economic challenges presented by the different players are certainly probably not the only thing to tackle. There's also other issues that might represent a more important step forward in terms of tackling the piracy, and that's certainly legislation, as we've already heard, is one of the pressing issues. Now, moving on to Glenn again, I'd like to ask about the EBU and its members. I know that you represent over 100 organizations worldwide. What are the critical concerns that you hear from your members in terms of this issue, and what you believe would be the steps need to be taken to resolve these pressing pains from your members?
Well, I maybe just kind of turn a little bit back to the previous question, because I think, you know, before I came to the EBU, I worked for pay TV. I worked for a telco. I ran OTT services, sports services, and IPTV platform for the largest telco in Ireland, and so I have a little bit of insight into it in terms of this piracy issue. You know, is not new. When God was a boy, I worked for a channel in the UK called ITV Digital, which collapsed partly because of piracy. You know, partly because they overpaid for sports rights, partly because the technology wasn't correct, but quite largely because the set-top boxes that they were distributing were getting hacked every week, and the rights lost value. So I saw firsthand the damage it can do. It collapsed an entity which had repercussions for the football in the UK for quite some time after it. The issue that, as I see it, is clearly a legislative issue. But I don't think it's as complex as it might seem to those who are looking in from the outside. These entities, these fire sticks or whatever they are that are kind of producing, you know, giving this content away for free, don't operate in a vacuum. They operate over platforms. They operate over telco providers who are providing the service for them. And let's be honest, those telcos are making money from that. Unless there is an obligation on telcos and on platforms to take this content down wholesale, and they can do it, we're going nowhere. I mean, I think if we start looking at the individual micro operators in each city, town, whatever, it's like whack-a-mole. It's ridiculous. It's just, you'll never beat it. But if you operate at a kind of platform level, which captures a wide variety, you know, everybody pretty much, and oblige them to take this content down and to stop this illegal activity, this theft, as Mark says, you know, it's a much quicker way to kind of resolve it. I know it's probably stating the obvious to those who are in the camp, who are kind of facing it every day, but it is one of those things. I think back to just briefly back to your point about the kind of issues that face our members. It's probably around the kind of, you know, it's a little bit off the piracy mark, but it's around the idea of distribution. Distribution of content is absolutely, you know, at the forefront of our minds right now. I think if you look at it from a consumer who's interested in sport, it's an absolutely horrible experience right now in terms of trying to access the sport that you love. You have to have multiple subscriptions. You don't know where to find stuff. It's you know, it's not aggregated. And I think from our side, on the free side, what we're trying to achieve is looking at a kind of a Europe-wide solution to ensure that we get maximum distribution of the content that our rights holders demand of us, and also to try and provide a shop window for the athletes of the future, to ensure that they're visible and that they're accessible. And I suppose it's about talking to federations about saying, listen, you don't have to produce your own OTT platform to get to direct to consumer. We can do it for you. We can work with our members, and we can actually kind of get an audience ready-made for you. I mean, I think when you're looking at the OTT world, there are three conditions that provide successful outcomes: great tech, great content, but the most important aspect that is often overlooked is fantastic and huge budgets for marketing. And that's something that our members have in spades. They have access to the best shop windows in every market that we operate in, and access to the audience. So there's so much content that is now going unseen because the market is broken. Broadcasters are no longer willing to pay for content that they were willing to pay for 10, 15 years ago. Everybody's being pushed up into the upper echelons of sport, and therefore the kind of the tier 2, tier 3 sports are really, really suffering. So I think from a health and well-being of sport, broadcast visibility, etc., is really important, and kind of using digital mechanisms to disseminate content, and in our instance for free, is a key driver for us, and something that we're very focused on, and we are very advanced in terms of launching a pan-European free digital sports platform.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your insights on this. Moving on to Mark, I'd like to ask you about this, building up on this collaboration. How critical do you believe global synergies and collaborations in this fight against piracy in sport are? What can be done together to tackle this problem?
Sure. Well, as I said, we've been obliged to work with our broadcasters very closely in this fight, because we don't have the rights ourselves over our content until it's been broadcast. So that's been a critical part of this collaboration. But I think what's perhaps important to understand here in terms of how we address this, Greg talked a little bit about the complexities of the ecosystem. It won't surprise you that the Sports Rights Owners Coalition has spent a lot of time and effort to get right into the nitty-gritty of how this piracy model actually works. And I think there are quite a few myths around it that perhaps I can help dispel here for the audience. I mean, whereas piracy started perhaps on some of the bigger platforms like YouTube, Facebook, or people in their own bedrooms streaming stuff to friends and putting it on social media platforms, that is really not the nub of the problem. And in fact, we have a lot of tools, as Greg said, to deal with that. Actually, the real issue is in the infrastructure of the dissemination of this content. For these pirate operations to work, they have to have scale. And there are only, in our estimation, 100 to 200 companies in Europe that have the capacity to actually stream content at the scale that pirates need. So the pirates are actually customers of these dedicated service providers, but not necessarily ISPs. In most cases, they're not the gatekeepers to the internet. They are people with huge data warehouses, with huge server capacity that they rent out, and the pirates use. And our members send out literally millions of notice and takedown instructions to these intermediaries every year. And some of them, in fairness, are pretty responsive, and they will take content down in that live window that I was talking about earlier. But if you're a pirate, you're probably going to work with those service providers who don't react very quickly, because that maximizes your value as a pirate, which comes back to the whole need for a legal instrument to enforce upon these intermediaries to act within a given time frame. And we have legal precedent in other court cases in Europe for 30 minutes being immediate. I mean, we'd like less than that, but we could live with 30 minutes rather than a woolly expeditious, which means different things to different people. But just to make the point that in terms of providing a remedy, it doesn't involve shutting down the internet or threatening free speech or dealing with Google and Facebook at all. It's really a surgical operation that we need to get to these dedicated servers which are fueling, as Greg said, IP television, as well as apps, as well as the more traditional website streaming. And if only we could have that remedy, we would be in a much better place.
Thank you very much. I'm told that we have now with us also Miguel Cardenal on the Zoom joining us. I don't know if he's been able to be with us from the start, and if he also had the opportunity to hear your previous interventions. I don't know. Well, if you can put up Miguel on the screen. Sorry? Okay, so no. Okay, so no, we won't be able to hear Miguel this time. I don't know, for one last round of quick comments or quick recommendations from each of you. We can start again with...
Sure,
you,
with pleasure. Look, I'll just end by basically throwing the ball back to the viewers and to people in the audience. Governments act on the basis of pressure from their constituents. If you are not vocal about what you want, if you don't ask, and ask again, by the way, it is rare that you will get what you need. So there is clearly an opportunity for integrity in sports to gain from strong European Union measures. We have a political class at the moment that's very much in its natural focused on very big issues, but the rationale should not be that they should replace everything else. So if this is an important issue, either for your business or because those rights inherently fund what you are doing, or because you are also a victim of piracy in your own right, I would call on you to, well, first of all, you can come and see me at the conference, but also to come and support us at national level with your governments, but also in Brussels if you're ever there, to help us out with this, because it is quite critical that we move the line on this and that we show support across as many stakeholders as possible. So I thank you in advance, and thank you again for this panel.
Well, look, I mean, I can only echo what's been said already. I mean, our mission at the EBU in Eurovision Sport is to ensure that there's a democratization of sport, that there is public access for free to major sports events, and that the public get access to that for free. But that should not be at the expense of the health and well-being of the sports ecosystem. Federations, the health and well-being of the sports federations is of primary concern to us also. Because if they're not doing well, then we're not doing our jobs properly. So from an EBU perspective, on behalf of our members, we are very, very open and very, very willing to put our shoulders to the wheel and to support the initiatives in this space. If at all we can lend a hand, we're here to help. It is a primary concern that sport does well. Sport continues to bring forward the values that we all hold dear, the competitive spirit in an open and transparent way. And if sport is being hamstrung in terms of its funding through piracy, then that is not a good result for anybody. So we're very much aligned on that mission. So we're here to help.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I understand that for politicians, piracy is an easy subject to put in the too difficult box to be resolved because they don't understand the technology and stuff like that. But, I don't really think that's the issue, as I've tried to explain this morning. I mean, all we're asking for, and all we've asked the European Union for, is for the rule of law to be upheld in this particular case, which it isn't. And we've had terrific support from the European Parliament. The European Parliament, as Greg mentioned, we had an event last week, very supportive, put a lot of pressure on the Commission to act. I think the critical thing now is the member states. And as Greg said, it's really, if we can get more support from each national government within the EU, that will be extremely helpful to do this. Because, let's face it, we've been put under a lot of pressure over the last 10 years to ensure the availability of content, to finance content for European creative works, and which we've done. And one of the big ironies for me is that we had a piece of legislation 5 or 6 years ago called the Portability Regulation. And some of you may be familiar with this. So if you have a digital subscription in any country in the EU, there is a legal fiction that if you travel to anywhere else in the EU, you can watch your subscription too. So if you're a subscriber to TV Sport in Portugal, you can watch it anywhere else in the EU. So, but the corollary of that an illegal piece of content in one country can still be watched in every other country. So we have portability of legal content, but we do not have non-portability of illegal content. And it really is just time that we close this loop, finished off, as Greg said, to make sure that rights owners, producers have the assurances, the insurances that they need, that their investments aren't going to go to waste and be stolen and exploited by others.
Thank you very much. We're wrapping up now. I'd like to thank you once again for your participation, and let's hope with the collaboration of all of your associations, also everyone involved, we can push forward the European Commission to finally take some action. Thank you.